Okay, let's see. Give me a second. Just gonna get online on Instagram. Okay. Oh, I'm doing YouTube Live for the first time ever, but no one really gets on Facebook anymore. So let's see. I got a lot of people who find me from YouTube. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so if you're watching, just tune in, say hey. I'm going to give you guys like a few minutes to say hi and get online. Cool, just wave, say hey, let me know that the tech is working, that you can hear me all right. Cool. So people are coming on. So today's live is about the masculine and feminine energy, as well as sex, gender, and sexuality, and how they integrate with Tantra. Awesome. So let me know that send me an emoji or something if the tech is working. So it's a lot of topics, but they are all kind of interrelated, and I don't want to put too much content out into the world around masculine and feminine energy, frankly, because I just think it's really overdone, and I'm tired of talking about it. And I recognize that there are many people who just don't know this stuff. So I'm really digging from the vault of some of the work I used to do a few years ago. All my work was in person, so now I'm bringing it online. So that's what some of today's content is all about. So let's just quickly define masculine energy. So, I mean, you could define it in heteronormative gender roles, in the way that a man is supposed to show up according to cultural ideals. However, these are socially constructed identities. I'm gonna just give me 1 second. I'm gonna close that door. Okay. So these are socially constructed identities. That's one way to identify it. So in Tantra, masculine energy is actually it's grounded. It's like Shiva. It's the Shiva energy. It holds space. It's present. It is assertive. It is practical. It's in the material world. It's grounded in the physical realm. We're here now. It's present. It has the ability to hold space. There's an emotional maturity to it because the feminine energy is also mature. This is when they're mature and fully developed. Feminine energy is fluid, it's creative, it's intuitive, it flows, it expresses itself. And the wounded feminine energy, or maybe the dark feminine, looks a little bit more like manipulative behavior, victim consciousness, um, really over dramatic emotions. So many people, if they get diagnosed with certain mental illnesses, it's really a lot more likely, in my belief, in my humble opinion, that they have a history of trauma, which has gone unintegrated for so long. And it shows up as maybe wounded feminine energy or even wounded masculine energy. Wounded masculine energy looks like being abusive, controlling, avoidant. Um, what else? Kind of unstable, flighty, unable to commit. This is all the wounded masculine energy. And you can kind of just look at some of these traits and notice if they're inside, if you're doing these things in your life. If you are, it's really likely that one or both are not fully integrated. And most people are not integrated whatsoever. So to even have the humility to notice that in yourself is a really big step. That being said, if you do see that, it's like, okay, well, how do I heal this, right? First of all, in psychology, these are more likely to be like a mother wound and a father wound. So the mother wound is the feminine wound, the father wound is the masculine wound. And if you have a strong one, if you had any history of abuse, trauma, even complex trauma, which is like a toxic relationship over the course of a long period of time, especially in your developmental years, that can create complex PTSD, which also, like, depending on someone's symptoms, they can really be misdiagnosed with many, many different quote unquote disorders, when the reality is they just have a history of trauma, and therapists are not always very well informed about that. Okay, before I make a whole leap into trauma, does anybody have any questions about masculine or feminine energy? Let me give you guys like a few minutes to talk to let me know. Okay, so let me know. So, sex, gender, and sexuality, this is an entire, I mean, this is actually what one of my degrees is in, and it's a conversation that I I've had for a long time. So, sex is actually what your genitalia or your chromosomes or your hormones define in you. So, this is actually a biological definition. Gender is fluid. Gender is completely a social construct. Gender has everything to do with what we collectively decide as female or male. It's what we collectively define as masculine or feminine, right? Including gendered energies and gendered identities as well. So even what I'm speaking about, it's through the realm of traditional tantra. It's through the realm of like Shiva energy and Shakti energy that has been taught thousands of years ago. Is it relevant still? Yes. Should we take it with a grain of salt, just like everything that was written thousands of years ago? Because we have evolved, right? But we can take the wisdom of the ancients and integrate it into the current climate. So we can take the wisdom of like what is Shiva energy, what is Shakti energy, and bring it into the current climate of, we live in a world with many different genders, probably infinite genders, frankly, but in most cultures, somewhere between 3 and 5. And that, I mean, they are all a dance of some variability of masculinity and femininity. There was always some polarity in each gender that we see. They're not usually a new energy, maybe a neutral energy, but not per se like a new energy. It's always like some of these traits, some more of one, more of the other. Some have certain body types, some have others, etc. Sexuality is a preference. It's what you prefer. It's who you're attracted to. It's the gender identity or the sex, like the physical sex that you're attracted to. So how do these relate to tantra? Well, I just explained a bit of it, right? As well, in modern days, we have neo tantra, which is all about finding your pleasure and following your following your bliss, all of these good things. And sometimes if you find a good tantra teacher, you'll find somebody who will teach you about shadow work and help you within that container of shadow work. However, a lot of it is very much based in these like somewhat polarized gender views. As well, traditional tantra, we work with expanding energy. We work with mantras, we work with rituals, we work with breath work, we work with yoga, we work with connection, sensuality, self-expression, presence, meditation, concentration. A lot of tantra is actually about celibacy. It's actually not about sex at all. It's actually the complete opposite. It's about harnessing your sexual energy through celibacy. Most people, I mean, sexuality, it's the most powerful force of nature. It's the most powerful form of desire that we can experience. Now you can follow it everywhere, and that's one way to live your life, but a tantric path is actually about harnessing it and growing within it and using that energy that you harness to create in different ways, to heal. So I want to differentiate the two for those of you who are interested in Tantra and those of you who maybe don't know exactly what it is. So I teach some of the more beginner practices because, frankly, like everyone's a beginner with this. Unless you've been practicing for a long time and you really have a sadhana down pat, you really know your breath and you really know what you're doing. And even then, there's a lot of inner healing work to do around inner child work, around healing that mother wound, healing that father wound, so that you can actually show up in an integrated way. And at that point, it's maybe possible, if it's the right path for you, to walk a tantric path. A tantric path is a pretty dark path. It's not love and light and butterflies. So if you're into love and light and butterflies, it may not be the path for you. It's a path of integrating darkness. It's a path of welcoming everything. In that process, you can start to see what's really here. You can accept what is in life, and you can harness the energy that creates life to produce, to create with art, to create with healing work, to connect, to go into very, very deep states of consciousness, quite frankly. And in these states of consciousness, I mean, it's ecstasy. Like you can find real ecstasy there. The same ecstasy that many people are looking for in all the cars they buy and the clothes they buy and the pleasure they're seeking. That ecstasy is inside of you. It's in the depths of yourself. It's in the depths of your soul. It's in your willingness to feel your grief. It's in the willingness to feel your sorrow. It's in the willingness to feel your anger, your happiness, your elation, your sexuality, your pleasure, and the discipline to be present with what is, right? So when we have an integrated masculine energy, you have the discipline, not by repression, which most people do, but really through like presence and allowing the feelings to arise and being present with them, being okay with them, as well as having an integrated feminine. If you're allowing those feelings to arise, you have to be, well, number one, to even be allowing those feelings to arise means you've somewhat activated your feminine energy, right? But to allow them to move with them, to not judge them, to not repress them, to not push them away, to not criticize them, but to really be with them and nurture them and nurture what's coming up and nurture what your inner child needs in that moment is so important. And you can do this through imagination work, through visualization, and through some of the practices that I teach. One and this integration of being able to be present and nurturing for your inner self, as well as being able to stay grounded with it, not letting all the emotions take you in every direction, not being like overly stressed and overly dramatic just like all of the time. Which a lot of people are. I've definitely been, I mean, I've been there too. I only speak about these things because I know them. I don't speak about them from a book. I speak about them from teachers, from my work in the ashrams and all the courses I've done and all the teachers and healers and therapists and mentors and all the coaches and beautiful people I've worked with and all the books I've read as well, but most importantly from my own soul, because I know this inside and out, right? And I don't offer the space that I hold in my container. So I offer a one-on-one container. It's 6 months. It's really for those of you guys who want to collapse timelines. It's for those of you guys who have been on a path for a little while and are ready to integrate, ready to feel those feelings that you just could not access before. And that process is how you heal them. That's how you heal your nervous system. That's how you shift how you show up in your relationships. That's how you start to have healthier relationships, healthier boundaries, coming from a place of like real sovereignty, not this like fierce, like, get away, right? It's how you start to have more peace in your life. Like you're just not like stressed about little things because there's just a different state of consciousness that you're operating from, you know? So it welcomes more peace, more abundance, more of the ability to learn from your life and your surroundings and the patterns in your life, more of the ability to look within and understand what you're doing to contribute to the life that you're living so that you can live more consciously without bypassing. Bypassing is using all the mindset work without doing any of the emotional healing work. That's what bypassing is. Bypassing is like you can read a book on all the spiritual texts and just say love and light and just show up and like always loving and everything's just like so good and you're just like so abundant. You're just like so grateful. And listen, if that's authentic, then beautiful, then you're walking this path. But a lot of times it's not authentic. A lot of times it's like we're saying the things because we should say the thing because we should be happier because everybody else is happier on social media or wherever else you're looking at all these other people where you don't even see that they're actually struggling with the same things in different stories and different packages as you are because it's all the human experience. And ultimately, authenticity is the goal. If there is a goal in spiritual work, if there is a goal in healing work, right? And authenticity does not mean be a raging bitch. And I probably shouldn't say that on social media, but it doesn't mean like be a horrible person to people. Some people say like, I'm authentic, I'm expressing myself, I can do what I want. But let's like have social skills as well, right? Have a sense of compassion and awareness is not just being aware of yourself, it's being aware of the space, being aware of the other people around you, being aware and present to what's happening right now. So, part of that journey is really like So as part of the teachings that I share, I'd help you develop not only self-awareness, healing your own emotional turbulence, which is directly related to your unhealthy relationships, but it's also cultivating the ability and the discipline to hold space for yourself, to meet your inner child, to heal your inner child, to work with the father wound, to work with the mother wound, to meet those parts of yourself so you can really release those stories and heal, like actually heal. Actually, like you will be a completely different person after this because I'm a completely different person than I was when I started this work too. And so are everyone I've worked with. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't even know where I was going with this. I'm so like calm and like chilled out right now. Does anybody have any questions before I hop off? If you've got any questions, this is what my 6-month container looks like. I also have options for those of you who just want to get a taste. Um, you'll learn different mantras, different Vedic practices, different kriyas, yoga, meditation, breath work, art therapy, dance, like all sorts of different ways, different emotional release tools, um, as well as like really like premium coaching and facilitating for your process so that you can heal your nervous system. And the purpose of healing your nervous system, if you're anybody who's ever had conflict in their relationships, like, hi, me, have you? If you're anybody who's ever had conflict in your relationships or currently has a lot of conflict in your relationships, this is for you because I'm going to be really blunt and honest with you, but the reason why you have conflict in your relationships is directly it's because of you. It's you. So once you can address that and start to meet yourself and start to see what is the underlying feeling, what is the underlying wound, why are you creating all of this pain in your life? What's the feeling around it? Where is it coming from? It's coming from some wounded child. So when you can meet that little wounded child through the way that I teach my clients, you and or any other way that you found. I mean, if you've got your own way, by all means, go for it. I'm not the only one sharing these things. Um, but when you can meet your inner child, when you can really integrate these pieces, those elements of the father wound and the mother wound, which are reflected in our, especially our romantic relationships, but quite frankly, our relationships not only with other people, but our relationship with money, our relationship with career, our relationships with like romantically or sexually, with our creativity, um, really our relationship with our health, like our relationship with everything in life, our whole life is a relationship. You're an experience relating to another experience, which is really the same experience, right? Like there's no experience outside of you and what you're having right now, what's occurring right now, and the story you're telling about it. Was there a defining moment for you in realizing how instrumental authenticity is into leading a more embodied and present life? I mean, so many. I think to an extent, that's a question I just got for anybody who didn't know where that came from. So I'll repeat it. Was there a defining moment for you in realizing how instrumental authenticity is to leading a more embodied and present life? A defining moment. I mean, there's been many. I think I've somehow always been pretty rebellious and authentic to myself. As an artist, I've always just been different. I really valued being eccentric and different. Um, and so, because my value system represented what I understand now as more of a somewhat of a spiritual ideal, I I was my bangs were like all over the place. I was really able to embody it most of my life. Not to say that there was no shadowy pieces, absolutely, like absolutely. But in terms of authenticity, it's always been important to me. However, the more we start to wake up and recognize our shadows and recognize how we contribute to the life we're living in every single way and every breath we take and take more responsibility for that. I mean, it's just an onion, like it doesn't stop. The path doesn't stop. It's just about continuously checking in and continuously becoming more and more authentic. But I mean, there's been many times, I suppose, when I had my, like, Kundalini awakening, I, for the first time ever, experienced, like, all my shadows, like, they were just like, like, I had no idea who I was until I realized I was everything I hated about the people in my life that had caused the most wounding for me. I was everything I judged them as. Literally, I was being it. I was saying it, and I couldn't stop myself. And it was like, oh my God. I was shaking and I was crying and my arms were going into mudras and I was having all these visions and I was totally losing it. But I was then in ashram and they're all like, "Yay, this is great," and I'm like, "It's horrible." So not everyone's awakening is quite as miserable as mine was, but like we all have different karma. Um, but that process of really like, yeah, waking up to my shit and like how much I had been contributing to the pain in my own life. I mean, it continues. It still continues today. I still notice. I'm like, oh, I'm doing that. Oh, I'm doing that. Um, But that's the path, right? It's I'm consistently becoming more and more and more and more aware. I do more and more shadow work to become aware of all the things I didn't know I was doing. And I only ever become aware of that which I can actually handle becoming aware of so I can really take responsibility and make a change. So nothing is too much for you. Nothing's gonna be revealed to you that you can't handle. You know, you're always going to oh, hi. You're always going to be shown that which you need to be shown, but the patterns are all around you. The patterns are within you. They're happening all the time. It's just the thing is that authenticity is really like it's just being you. Whereas we live in a culture really like worldwide. I've lived in many different cultures. It's an epidemic. It's just the way that the mind works. But we do live in a human culture where denial is it's a hell of a drug, and it's something that most people are doing. Most people are denying who they are because it means that like it's like, oh, like I'm a positive person. As example, I'll say I'm a positive person, love and light, butterflies, whatever. So I'm completely disregarding everything about me that might be somewhat negative. And those people who are like, I only want to have positive interactions, they're also disregarding everything about themselves that's negative, you know? And in that process, they're actually stunting their emotional and psychological growth. Like if we take spirituality, I mix it with psychology because I really just don't think there's one without the other. But you're completely stunting your psychological and emotional growth. You're the reason why your relationships aren't working. You're not setting boundaries. It's not about setting boundaries around all your triggers. If it completely destabilizes your mental health, that's a different story. If a trigger like gets you to that point, versus if you're triggered and you're like, why am I triggered? Like, what is my shit here? Is this something in the relationship? Is this my shadow? What am I not seeing here in myself? What am I rejecting in myself? That process is part of the process of owning your shadow. And when you can own your shadow, you can own your quote unquote negativity or even own your quote unquote positivity because your shadow is just what's unconscious. It's just what you don't see. It's just your blind spot. It's not like dark. It's not dark or light. It just depends on like how you were conditioned and what kind of emotional and social behavior was allowed in your environment growing up. If you were only ever allowed to be sad or angry growing up, that's what was conditioned in your family unit or whatever you grew up in, then happiness and pleasure are probably in your shadow. You probably have a hard time accessing pleasure, right? Or the opposite, if maybe you grew up in a family where it's all positivity, or even, or maybe your family was negative and this was my family was negative, and I was like, I'm gonna be positive. I'm a positive person. I have a positive attitude all the time. Oh my God. I had so much positivity and sunshine and butterflies like coming out of me. Like I exploded because I just had no access to anything else that was happening inside of me. I just did not see it. And so welcoming that, welcoming it all, like welcoming the whole human experience and being with your sorrow, being with all of those emotions, it can be painful. Tantra is not a love and light path. Nowhere near it. It's not a path of like ecstasy and pleasure. I mean, like ecstasy and pleasure come, but so does grief, so does pain, so does melancholy, so does anger. Um, you actually cannot like the more the more depth you can access with any of your emotions, you can likely access with all of them. But if you're not accessing certain emotions, you're not going to access the ecstasy that you want, the pleasure that you want. Um, okay, that was a rant. But yeah, does anybody else have any questions? before I hop off? Hey, everybody. And say hi to all y'all. No questions. Okay, beautiful. I'll leave it there. 25 minutes. It's a good amount of time. Chilling out, blissing out. Woo. If anybody is curious to learn more or you think of a question later or you're catching this on the replay, just comment below. Lots of love.